Keith's night had started like any other. The silence of his apartment wrapped around him like a comfortable blanket as he sat in his living room, the soft glow of his reading lamp creating a small island of light in the darkness. Outside, a gentle rain tapped against the windows, adding a soothing rhythm to the quiet evening. He had just finished a long day at work, his body tired, but his mind still active, wandering through thoughts and concerns that kept sleep at bay. It was nearly midnight when he heard it, a soft, hesitant knock at his door, so gentle that at first he thought he had imagined it. When it came again, slightly more insistent, a frown crossed his face. Who would be at his door at this hour? Caution mingled with curiosity as he approached the door. Through the peephole, all he could make out was a slender figure partially obscured by shadows. A neighbor in trouble, perhaps? With slight hesitation, he opened the door. The sight that greeted him stole his breath away. Standing on his threshold was a woman, or at least a being in the form of a woman, unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin was a soft lavender hue that seemed to shimmer faintly in the hallway's dim light. Her eyes, slightly larger than human eyes, held an inner luminescence that shifted between silver and pale blue. Her features were delicate yet otherworldly, beautiful in a way that defied conventional understanding. She wore what appeared to be a cloak of iridescent material that rippled and changed color slightly with her movements, like the surface of a soap bubble. Keith stood frozen, his hand still on the doorknob, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "Hello," the being said, her voice melodious with an accent he couldn't place. Each word seemed to carry subtle harmonics, like several voices speaking at once. "I'm sorry to disturb you at this late hour." Keith remained speechless, his rational mind fighting between fear, confusion, and an inexplicable sense of wonder. "My name is Megan," she continued, her luminous eyes studying his face with what seemed like equal parts curiosity and apprehension. Then, with a vulnerability that seemed to transcend her alien appearance, she asked, "May I sleep beside you tonight, human?" The request was so unexpected that Keith finally found his voice. What?" he stammered, certain he had misheard. Megan's gaze dropped briefly, a gesture that seemed surprisingly human in its display of uncertainty. "I have been observing. Humans seek comfort in proximity to one another. You share sleep spaces for security and emotional well-being." Her eyes lifted to meet his again. "I need this comfort tonight. I am alone here." Keith's mind raced with questions, with warnings, with the sheer impossibility of the situation. Was this a dream? A hallucination? Some elaborate prank? Yet the being before him seemed so genuinely vulnerable, her request so straightforward despite its strangeness. "You're not human," he stated the obvious, his voice barely above a whisper. "No," Megan confirmed simply. "I am not." 1,000 questions burned on Keith's tongue. What was she? Where did she come from? Why was she here, at his door specifically? But what came out instead was, "Why me?" A faint smile curved Megan's lips. "I have been watching your building. You live alone. You are kind to others. I have seen how you helped the elderly woman with her groceries, how you spoke gently to the child who lost his toy." She paused. "And your eyes? They carry loneliness similar to what I feel." Keith felt exposed, seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and strangely comforting. He stood at a crossroads of decision, knowing that whatever choice he made would irrevocably change his life. Common sense screamed caution, but something deeper, perhaps the very loneliness she had identified, pulled him toward compassion. "Just to sleep?" he asked, still hesitant. "Just to not be alone," she clarified. "To feel safe for a night." Against all rational judgment, Keith stepped aside. "Come in." Megan entered with graceful, hesitant steps, her cloak shimmering with subtle ripples of color as she moved. Inside, in the proper light of his apartment, her alienness became even more apparent. The way her movements flowed too smoothly, the slight translucency of her lavender skin that revealed a faint network of luminescent veins beneath. "Thank you," she said, standing in the center of his living room, looking both out of place and, somehow, like she belonged in a way Keith couldn't explain. An awkward silence fell between them. The ordinary rituals of hosting a guest, offering a drink, making small talk about the weather, seemed absurdly inadequate for the situation. So, Keith finally said, running a hand through his hair, "You want to sleep? Are you tired? Do you sleep like humans do?" Megan tilted her head slightly, considering. "My physiology requires periods of rest, yes. It is not identical to human sleep, but similar in function." She glanced around the apartment. "Where do you sleep?" Keith pointed toward his bedroom door. "In there, on a bed." Megan nodded and moved toward the bedroom with the same fluid grace. Keith followed, feeling as if he were in some surreal dream. He watched as she approached his bed with curiosity, reaching out to touch the comforter with slender fingers. "It's soft," she observed, surprise evident in her voice. "Haven't you seen beds before?" Keith asked. "If you've been observing humans?" "Only from a distance," she admitted. "I have not experienced them directly." Keith realized with a start just how strange this situation was. He was about to share his bed with an alien being who had apparently never even touched a bed before. Yet here he was, pulling back the covers and explaining how pillows worked. "This is where your head goes," he explained, gesturing to the pillows. "It provides support and comfort." Megan sat gingerly on the edge of the bed, her expression one of wonder as she felt the mattress give beneath her weight. "It yields," she said, "yet supports." Fascinating. Despite the bizarreness of it all, Keith found himself smiling at her reaction. There is something endearing about watching someone experience such an ordinary thing for the first time. "Do you sleep with coverings?" she asked, touching the blanket. "Yes, for warmth and comfort," Keith explained. Then a thought occurred to him. "Do you need to change clothes or anything?" "To sleep, I mean." Megan looked down at her shimmering cloak. "This adapts," she said, and before Keith's eyes, the material of her garment shifted, becoming something more akin to loose-fitting pajamas, though still with that subtle iridescence. "Is this appropriate?" "Why, yes," Keith stammered, amazed by the transformation. "That's fine." An awkward realization settled over him. "I should change too," he said, grabbing a t-shirt and pajama pant from his dresser. "I'll just—" He gestured toward the bathroom. When he returned, Megan was still sitting on the edge of the bed, looking uncertain. "You can lie down," Keith said gently. "Like this." He demonstrated by sitting on the opposite side of the bed and then reclining against the pillows on top of the covers. Megan mirrored his actions with careful deliberation, lying back stiffly at first, then gradually relaxing as she adjusted to the sensation. "It is very comfortable," she said, a note of surprise in her melodious voice. Keith nodded, hyper-aware of her presence just feet away from him. "So, do you want to tell me where you're from? Or why you're really here?" Megan turned her head to look at him, her luminous eyes searching his face. "I am from very far away," she said simply. "And I am here because I needed to be." The full explanation is complex. Keith wanted to press for more details, but sensed her reluctance. Perhaps it wasn't the right time. "Okay," he said instead. "We can talk more tomorrow if you want." She nodded, grateful for his understanding. Then, with hesitation, she asked, "How do humans arrange themselves when sharing sleep spaces?" "I have observed various configurations." Keith felt a flush creep up his neck. "Well, it depends on the relationship. Friends might just lie side by side. People in intimate relationships might, hold each other." "I see," Megan said, considering this information. After a moment, she extended her hand across the space between them, palm up, an invitation. "May I?" Keith looked at her outstretched hand, slender and lavender-hued. Despite her alien appearance, the gesture was unmistakably vulnerable, human in its essence. Slowly, he placed his hand in hers. Her skin was smooth and slightly cooler than human temperature, with a subtle vibration that reminded him of a cat's purr. As their hands connected, a sense of calm washed over him, unexpected and profound. "Your warmth," she said softly. "It's comforting." They stayed like that, hand in hand, as the rain continued to patter against the windows. The strangeness of the situation gradually gave way to a peaceful quiet. Keith found himself relaxing, his earlier fears and confusion fading into the background. "Thank you," Megan whispered, her voice carrying those subtle harmonics, "for not turning me away." "You're welcome," Keith replied, surprised at how natural it felt to say it. As the night deepened, they lay in comfortable silence. Keith had 1,000 questions, but they could wait until morning. For now, there was just this, an unexpected connection, a shared moment of peace. His eyelids grew heavy, and the last thing he remembered before drifting off to sleep was the gentle pressure of Megan's hand in his, an anchor in the strangeness of it all. When Keith woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the gaps in his curtains, painting warm stripes across his bed. For a moment, he forgot the events of the previous night, stretching comfortably as he did every morning. Then his gaze fell on Megan, and the memory rushed back. She was still asleep, her lavender features softened in repose. In the morning light, she seemed both more and less alien. The unearthly beauty of her features remained, but there was something vulnerable and familiar in her peaceful expression. Her iridescent clothing had shifted during the night, adapting to her sleeping form, now resembling a simple, flowing nightgown. Keith propped himself up on one elbow, taking the opportunity to study her more openly than he had dared to the night before. The faint network of luminescent veins beneath her skin pulsed gently with what he assumed was her heartbeat, or whatever equivalent her species had. Her hair, which appeared almost silver, caught the sunlight and refracted it in subtle prismatic patterns. As if sensing his observation, Megan's eyes fluttered open. Unlike human eyes waking from sleep, hers were instantly alert, the luminescence brightening from a dim glow to their full silver-blue radiance. "Good morning," Keith said softly, feeling strangely shy. Megan blinked, her gaze taking in the sunlit room before settling on Keith's face. For a brief moment, confusion crossed her features, followed by recognition and what appeared to be relief. "Morning," she echoed, the word carrying a tentative quality as if testing it. "The start of a new day cycle." Keith smiled. "Yes, exactly." He sat up fully, running a hand through his sleep-tousled hair. "Did you rest well?" Megan nodded, mirroring his movement to sit up. "Yes. Your sleeping platform, bed, is very conducive to effective rest." A small, almost shy smile curved her lips. "And your presence was comforting as I had hoped." The simple admission brought a warmth to Keith's cheeks. "I'm glad," he said, then ventured the question that had been foremost in his mind since the night before. "Megan, why are you really here? On Earth, I mean, and why come to me?" The smile faded from Megan's face, replaced by a more solemn expression. She looked down at her hands, which were now folded in her lap. "I did not intend to come to Earth specifically," she said after a moment. "My vessel experienced a malfunction during transit through your solar system. I was forced to make an emergency landing." "You have a spaceship?" Keith asked, his eyes widening. "Had," Megan corrected, a note of sadness in her voice. "It was damaged beyond repair during the landing. Most of its systems are non-functional, including communication capabilities." "So you're stranded," Keith said, understanding dawning. "That's why you said you were alone here." Megan nodded. "I have been on your planet for 17 of your days. I have been observing, learning your languages and customs, trying to determine how to proceed." She lifted her gaze to meet his. "Humans are unpredictable in their reactions to the unknown. I have witnessed both kindness and cruelty. I did not know who to trust." "But you decided to trust me," Keith said softly. "Yes. After observing you, I determined you were safe." She hesitated, then added, "And there was something else, a resonance I cannot fully explain, something that drew me to you specifically." Keith absorbed this information, trying to wrap his mind around the reality that he had an extraterrestrial refugee in his apartment. The implications were staggering. "Do you need to get back? Is someone looking for you?" A shadow passed over Megan's features. "Eventually, yes. My people will notice my absence, but interstellar distances being what they are, it could be some time before they determine my location." She looked around the bedroom, then back at Keith. Until then, I must adapt to life here. Learn to blend in. Keith ran a hand through his hair, suddenly overwhelmed by the practicalities. Right. Okay. So you need a place to stay, food. Do you eat human food? And clothes and... God, we need to make sure no one discovers what you are. I can consume some of your foods for energy, yes, Megan said. And my appearance can be adjusted to a degree. Before Keith's eyes, her lavender skin tone shifted, becoming a more human pale peach, though still with an unusual luminous quality. Her eyes dimmed somewhat, the silver blue glow becoming more subdued, though still striking. Is this better? Keith stared, fascinated by the transformation. That's amazing, but your eyes are still quite unusual, and your skin still has that glow to it. Megan's expression fell slightly. This is the extent of my biological adaptation capabilities. I cannot completely mimic human appearance. No, it's okay, Keith assured her quickly. We can work with this. Sunglasses for your eyes when we're outside, and maybe we can say you have a skin condition that gives you that glow, or that you're an avant-garde model who uses special makeup. A small smile returned to Megan's face. You are very resourceful. The reality of the situation was beginning to settle on Keith. He had a job, responsibilities, a life that didn't typically include harboring alien visitors. This is going to be complicated, he murmured, more to himself than to her. I understand if it is too much to ask, Megan said quietly. I can seek shelter elsewhere. The thought of sending her out alone, vulnerable and unfamiliar with Earth's dangers, made Keith's chest tighten. No, he said firmly. You can stay here. We'll figure it out together. Relief softened Megan's features. Thank you, Keith. The sound of his name in her melodious voice sent an unexpected warmth through him. You're welcome. Now let's start with the basics. Are you hungry? The next hour was spent in a curious exploration of Keith's apartment from Megan's perspective. The bathroom was a particular source of fascination for her. You immerse yourselves in water for cleansing, she observed as Keith explained to shower. Fascinating. My people use sonic vibrations. Like a sonic shower? Keith asked, then smiled at her confused expression. Sorry, that's from a science fiction show. Human imagination about alien technology. I would be interested to learn about how humans imagine beings like me, Megan said, running her fingers under the tap water with evident wonder. The kitchen provided even more discoveries. Megan approached each appliance with cautious curiosity, jumping back slightly when the toaster popped up the bread Keith had inserted. It's just toast, he explained, laughing softly at her startled expression. Bread that's been heated until it's crisp. Megan approached the toast carefully, picking it up and examining it before taking a tentative bite. Her eyes widened. The transformation of texture is interesting, and there are complex compounds formed in the browning process. You can taste that? Keith asked, impressed. My sensory perception is more detailed than yours in some ways, she explained, though I suspect less nuanced in others. As they ate breakfast together, Megan sampling small bites of everything Keith prepared, he tried to formulate a plan. I have to go to work on Monday, he said. That's still 2 days from now, so we have the weekend to figure things out. You'll need to stay here when I'm gone, at least until we're sure you can pass as human in extended interactions. Megan nodded. I can use the time to learn more. You have books, information sources? Books, internet, TV, plenty of ways to learn about us, Keith confirmed. Then he frowned. But Megan, you need to understand, if people found out what you really are, it could be dangerous. There are organizations, governments that would, well, they might not have your best interests at heart. A shadow crossed Megan's features. I am aware of the risks. I have observed enough to understand that many humans fear what is different. She met his gaze steadily. I will be careful. Keith nodded, feeling a strange protectiveness wash over him. This being from another world had placed her trust in him, and he was determined not to let her down. So, he said with forced cheerfulness, what would you like to do today? Your first full day on Earth, officially not alone. Megan's expression brightened. I would like to learn about human joy, she said, surprising him. In my observations, I have seen humans experiencing many emotional states. Joy seems to be highly valued, but exhibited in diverse ways that I do not fully comprehend. Keith smiled. Joy, huh? That's a big topic, but I think we can work on that. And so began their weekend of discovery. Keith found himself seeing his ordinary life through new eyes as he introduced Megan to simple pleasures. The taste of chocolate, which made her eyes glow brighter with delight. The feel of soft blankets against skin. The sound of music playing on his speakers. Music, in particular, affected Megan profoundly. Keith played her various genres, watching in fascination as she closed her eyes, her body swaying slightly to the rhythms. When a particularly beautiful piano piece played, he was startled to see what looked like tears shimmering in her eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, concerned. "The vibrations," she whispered. "They create patterns that resonate with my perception in a way I have never experienced. It feels. She struggled to find the words. "It feels like being connected to something larger than myself." Keith nodded, understanding. Music can do that for humans too. It's one of our most universal languages. As they sat together on the sofa, listening to song after song, Keith became increasingly aware of Megan's presence beside him. The subtle glow of her skin, the graceful way she moved, the genuine wonder with which she approached each new experience. There was something profoundly affecting about witnessing someone discover the world anew. That night, there was no question about sleeping arrangements. After a day spent together, the awkwardness of the previous night had dissipated. They prepared for bed with a nascent routine already forming between them. Megan adapting her iridescent garment in a sleepwear once again, Keith changing in the bathroom. This time, when they laid down together, Megan moved closer to him, not just reaching for his hand but gently laying her head against his shoulder. "Is this acceptable?" she asked softly. "Yes," Keith replied, his heartbeat quickening at her proximity. "It's fine." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound their breathing gradually synchronizing. "Keith," Megan said into the darkness, "tell me about your life." Before me. Keith considered the question, realizing how ordinary his existence would seem to her. "It's not very exciting," he admitted. "I work as a software developer. I write instructions that tell computers what to do. I live alone, as you observed. I have some friends, but we don't see each other as often as we used to. Life gets busy, people drift apart." He paused, surprised by the tinge of melancholy in his own voice. "I guess I was a bit lonely, though I didn't really think about it that way." "Loneliness," Megan repeated thoughtfully. "The state of isolation despite being among others. My people experience this differently. We are more connected in ways that are difficult to explain in your language." "Telepathy," Keith guessed. "Not exactly. More like a shared consciousness that we can access when desired, while maintaining individual identity." She shifted slightly against him. "It is one of the things I miss most." "That sounds beautiful," Keith said, "and a little scary from a human perspective. We value our privacy, our separate thoughts. Each way of being has its benefits and limitations," Megan observed. "But being cut off from that connection has been challenging. Until last night, I had not realized how much physical proximity could help compensate for its absence." Keith felt a surge of empathy for her. To be stranded on an alien world was one thing, but to be cut off from such a fundamental aspect of her existence seemed unbearably lonely. "I'm glad I can help," he said softly, hesitantly bringing his arm around her in a gentle embrace. "Even if I can't offer the kind of connection you're used to." Megan nestled closer, her body fitting against his with surprising naturalness. "It is different," she acknowledged, "but it has its own value, its own beauty." As they drifted toward sleep, Keith found himself wondering about the strangeness of the universe, how it could bring two beings from entirely different worlds together in this moment of shared comfort. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, right now, this connection felt both precious and fragile, like holding a small flame against the vastness of space. The weekend passed in a blur of discovery and quiet moments of connection. Keith showed Megan movies. She was particularly moved by E.T., seeing parallels to her own situation. introduced her to different foods. She developed a strong preference for fruit, especially strawberries, and helped her understand human customs and behavior through books and conversation. In turn, Megan shared what she could about her world and species, though much of it defied translation into human concepts. She came from a planet in what humans would call the Andromeda Galaxy, part of a civilization far more technologically advanced than Earth's. Her people lived in harmony with their environment, having long ago developed sustainable technologies that eliminated the need for resource competition. "We do not have war as you understand it," she explained as they sat together one evening. "Conflicts are resolved through consensus building within the shared consciousness." "That sounds utopian," Keith remarked. Megan tilted her head thoughtfully. "Perhaps by human standards, but my society has its own limitations. We value logic and collective benefit to such an extent that individual expression is sometimes discouraged. Emotions are seen as primitive, unnecessary, except in controlled contexts." "Is that why you're so fascinated by human emotions?" Keith asked. "Yes," Megan admitted. "Your species embraces emotional experience in ways mine has forgotten. It is both chaotic and beautiful to witness." As Monday approached, they developed a plan. Megan would stay in the apartment while Keith worked, continuing her study of human culture through his books, TV, and limited internet access. They established emergency protocols, places to hide if someone came to the door, a cover story if she was discovered, my cousin from overseas, visiting for a few weeks. The first day apart was strange for both of them. Keith found himself distracted at work, constantly checking his phone for the text Megan had learned to send from his old spare cell phone. Her messages were endearingly formal at first, becoming more relaxed as the day progressed. "All is well. I am continuing my studies as planned. I have discovered a cooking program on your television. The transformation of ingredients is fascinating. Your cat neighbor visited the window ledge. We observed each other for 7.3 minutes. By the time Keith returned home, he was rushing through the door with an eagerness that surprised him. The sight of Megan waiting for him, her face lighting up, quite literally, as her skin's glow intensified at his arrival, sent a warm rush through his chest. "You've been cooking," he observed, smelling something that reminded him of cinnamon. Megan nodded, a hint of pride in her expression. "I attempted to replicate a recipe I observed. It may not be exact, as I had to substitute some ingredients." What followed was one of the most enjoyable evenings Keith could remember. They ate Megan's experimental apple dessert, surprisingly good, despite some creative spice choices, and she eagerly shared everything she had learned during the day. Keith found himself laughing more than he had in months, delighted by her unique perspectives and observations about human customs. As they settled on the couch afterward, Megan closer to his side than she had been the previous evenings, Keith realized that something had shifted between them. What had begun as an extraordinary encounter with an alien being was evolving into something else, a genuine connection that transcended their differences. "Keith," Megan said softly, her luminous eyes studying his face, "I have been researching human emotional attachments. The variations are complex and fascinating." Keith felt his pulse quicken. "They can be, yes. In my observations, I have noticed that physical proximity often accompanies emotional proximity." Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining in what had become a familiar gesture. "Is this true in your experience?" "Often, yes," Keith replied, aware of how carefully she was navigating this conversation. "People who care about each other usually want to be close physically." Megan nodded, processing this. "I find that I care about you, Keith, in ways that exceed gratitude for your assistance." "Is this inappropriate?" The directness of her question caught him off guard, but there was something refreshing about her honesty. "No," he said after a moment. "It's not inappropriate. I care about you too." Her skin's glow intensified subtly, a reaction Keith had come to recognize as emotional response. How does one proceed when such mutual care is established? Keith couldn't help smiling at her analytical approach to what humans would stumble through with far less clarity. "It depends on the people involved and what they both want. There's no single protocol." "What do you want?" Megan asked simply, The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibilities. Keith looked at her, this extraordinary being who had quite literally fallen into his life from the stars, and felt a surge of emotion that both thrilled and terrified him. "I want to keep knowing you," he said finally. "I want to see where this goes, whatever it is. But Megan, this is complicated. You're from another world, literally. There's so many unknowns." "Yes," she agreed. "There are many variables. But in my culture, we have a concept that might translate as navigating complexity together. It suggests that certain paths are worth exploring precisely because their outcomes cannot be predicted." Keith smiled. "We have a similar concept. We call it taking a leap of faith." "Then," Megan said, her voice carrying those subtle harmonics that made it so uniquely beautiful, "I would like to take this leap with you, Keith." In response, Keith gently raised his hand to her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek in a tender caress. Her skin felt warm beneath his touch, the subtle luminescence pulsing slightly faster. "Your heart rate has increased," she observed softly. "It does that when I'm nervous," he admitted. "Or excited." "Both?" she asked, perceptive as always. "Both," he confirmed with a smile. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, Keith leaned forward. Their lips met in a gentle, tentative kiss, a bridge across the vast cosmos that had separated their worlds. When they parted, Megan's eyes were shining with an intensity he hadn't seen before. "That was more complex than it appears when observed," she whispered. Keith laughed softly. "Some things you have to experience to understand." She nodded, then nestled against him, her head finding its now familiar place on his shoulder. "I'm glad you are the human I found, Keith." "I'm glad you found me, too," he replied, holding her close as night settled around them, the stars visible through his window, stars that no longer seemed quite so distant or cold. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that began to feel almost normal, despite its extraordinary foundation. Keith worked during the day, while Megan continued her studies of Earth culture and attempted to repair components from her damaged vessel using makeshift materials from Keith's home. Evenings and weekends were spent together, each day bringing new discoveries for both of them. Their connection deepened with each passing day. Megan proved to be not just an observer of humanity, but an insightful and compassionate companion. She listened to Keith's frustrations about work with genuine interest, offered perspectives on his life that were both alien and remarkably perceptive, and gradually shared more about her own world and experiences. For his part, Keith found himself opening up in ways he never had with anyone before. There was something liberating about Megan's non-human perspective. She held none of the cultural biases or judgments that often colored human interactions. He could speak honestly about his fears, his dreams, his regrets, and find in her a listener who sought only to understand, never to condemn. Physical intimacy developed naturally between them, a gentle exploration of connection that respected both their differences and similarities. Some nights, they would simply hold each other, finding comfort in presence. Other times, their curiosity led to more intimate discoveries, navigating the unfamiliar territory of cross-species affection with tentative joy. But as idyllic as their private world had become, reality waited at its borders. The first real threat came nearly a month after Megan's arrival, when Keith woke in the night to find her trembling beside him, her skin paler than usual and her normally radiant eyes dimmed. "Megan," he whispered, immediately alert. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," she said, her voice weak, the harmonics distorted. "I feel diminished. Systems failing." Fear clutched at Keith's heart. He placed a hand on her forehead and found it burning hot. "You're sick," he realized. "Your body must be reacting to something on Earth, bacteria, viruses, something your immune system isn't designed to handle." Megan nodded weakly. "Possible. My biological adaptation capabilities are limited. I had hoped." She broke off as a shiver ran through her. Keith felt helpless. He couldn't take her to a hospital. The risk of exposure was too great, and human medicine might do more harm than good for her alien physiology. Yet doing nothing was unthinkable. "What can I do?" he asked, trying to keep the panic from his voice. Is there anything from your ship that could help? Medical supplies? Megan's eyes closed briefly as she concentrated. The medical module was damaged, but there might be regenerative compounds in the environmental control system. It's one of the components I've been trying to repair. Keith nodded. Where is it? What does it look like? With Megan's guidance, Keith located the alien device hidden in the back of his closet. A silvery, disc-shaped object about the size of a dinner plate, with intricate circuitry visible beneath a translucent surface. Following her increasingly faint instructions, he managed to extract a small vial of luminescent blue fluid from a compartment in the device. This needs to be absorbed, Megan explained, her breathing labored. Through the skin, over the central nervous cluster. Where is that? Keith asked, holding the precious vial carefully. Megan guided his hand to a spot at the base of her neck. Here, the fluid must be applied slowly, a few drops at a time. With trembling hands, Keith administered the alien medicine, watching anxiously as each drop was absorbed into Megan's lavender skin, leaving a briefly glowing trace before disappearing. After the last drop was gone, Megan lay still, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow but steadier. Now we wait, she whispered. Keith didn't sleep again that night. He sat beside Megan, holding her hand, whispering reassurances, and trying to ignore the terrifying thought that he might lose her. By morning, her fever had broken, and the glow had begun to return to her skin, but she remained weak, drifting in and out of consciousness. For 3 days, Keith called in sick to work and rarely left Megan's side. They had a close call when his boss, concerned by his uncharacteristic absence, stopped by to check on him. Keith had just barely managed to hide the still-recovering Megan in his bedroom before answering the door, making excuses about a severe flu. On the 4th day, Megan finally regained enough strength to sit up and eat. Her recovery accelerated after that, her alien physiology demonstrating remarkable resilience once the regenerative compound had done its work. I was afraid I would lose you, Keith admitted one evening as they sat together on the balcony, watching the sunset. I've never been so scared. Megan's fingers intertwined with his, her touch now so familiar yet still fascinating in its subtle alienness. In my culture, we do not fear death as humans do, she said softly. We see it as a transition, a rejoining with the collective consciousness. She paused, her luminous eyes meeting his. But I found myself afraid too, not of ceasing to exist, but of losing this. Losing you, losing what we have created together. The admission hung in the air between them, profound in its implications. For Megan to fear separation from him meant her priorities had shifted in a fundamental way. You're changing me, she continued thoughtfully. My people would say I am becoming compromised by emotional attachment. They would not understand how such compromise could also be enrichment. Keith squeezed her hand gently. Do you regret it? These changes? No, she replied without hesitation. Though I wonder sometimes what awaits me when if my people come for me. It was a question that had lingered unspoken between them, the temporary nature of their time together. Sooner or later, Megan's people would discover her location. Sooner or later, decisions would have to be made. For now, though, they had this moment, this connection that neither had expected but both now treasured. They sat in companionable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to appear, stars that Megan could name in her own language, some of which she had visited in her travels. Their peaceful routine resumed, but with a new depth to their relationship, forged in the crucible of Megan's illness and recovery. Keith found himself thinking of the future in ways he hadn't before, not just the next day or week, but months and years ahead. Always in these thoughts, Megan was by his side. The impossibility of this vision didn't diminish its appeal. Then came a night that changed everything. They were watching a movie together, Megan curled against Keith's side in what had become their usual position, when a high-pitched sound, just at the edge of human hearing, made her suddenly stiffen. What is it? Keith asked, immediately alert to her distress. A signal, she whispered, her eyes wide. From my people. They've found me. Keith's heart sank even as he tried to process what this meant. How? Were they saying? Megan stood, moving to the window as if drawn there. It's an automated location beacon. A ship will follow. Her voice was tight with emotion, fear, anticipation, conflict. They will be here within days. The world seemed to tilt beneath Keith's feet. Days. After weeks of living in their private bubble, reality was intruding with brutal swiftness. What will happen? He asked, coming to stand beside her at the window. Above them, the night sky revealed nothing unusual to his human eyes, but he knew Megan could perceive far more. They will extract me, she said simply. Repair my vessel, or provide transport. They will expect me to return with them. And if you don't want to go? The question escaped before Keith could consider its implications. Megan turned to him, her expression complex. Not returning would be unprecedented. My people do not abandon the collective without cause. Is love a cause? Keith asked softly. The word hung between them, spoken for the first time, though it had been growing in the silences and touches they had shared. Love, Megan repeated, as if testing the concept. The human emotion of deep attachment and care. We have a similar concept, though it's understood differently. She reached out to touch his face, her fingers tracing the contours of his features as if memorizing them. If love means what I feel for you, this desire to remain, to continue our journey together, to choose one connection over all others, then yes, Keith. Love would be my cause. Keith pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the enormity of what lay ahead began to sink in. We'll figure this out, he promised, though he had no idea how. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. The next few days passed in a strange limbo of anticipation and dread. They tried to maintain their normal routine, but the knowledge of what was coming colored every moment. Megan spent hours working with components from her damaged vessel, tried to establish clearer communication with the approaching ship. Keith found himself researching obscure international laws, wondering if there was any legal framework on Earth that could protect an extraterrestrial who wished to claim asylum. On the third night, after the signal, Megan woke Keith from a restless sleep, her skin glowing more brightly than usual. They're here, she said simply. Together, they went to the roof of Keith's apartment building. The night was clear, the city lights below them creating a mirror of the stars above. For several minutes, nothing seemed unusual. Then, a section of the sky shimmered, like heat rising from pavement, and a vessel appeared. It wasn't the flying saucer of human science fiction, nor the sleek starship of popular movies. Instead, it resembled an enormous, translucent jellyfish, pulsing with the same subtle luminescence as Megan's skin. It descended silently, coming to hover about 50 feet above the rooftop. It's beautiful, Keith whispered, awestruck despite his apprehension. It's a small retrieval vessel, Megan explained, her voice tight with emotion. Designed for extraction missions. As they watched, a beam of light extended from the craft to the rooftop about 20 feet from where they stood. Within this column of light, a figure began to take form. Humanoid, but clearly not human, with the same lavender skin as Megan, but taller, more angular in build. The being stepped forward as the light beam dissipated, regarding them with eyes that glowed a deep violet. Emissary Megan, the being said, its voice carrying the same harmonic qualities as Megan's, but deeper, more resonant. We have been searching for you. Megan straightened, her posture becoming more formal than Keith had ever seen. Navigator Thelian, she acknowledged. I apologize for the concern my disappearance must have caused. The being, Thelian, tilted its head, gaze shifting to Keith. You have integrated with the local population. This is unexpected. This is Keith, Megan said, her hand finding Keith's and gripping it tightly. He has provided shelter and assistance since my emergency landing. Without him, I might not have survived. Thelian studied Keith with an intensity that made him feel transparent, as if the alien could see through to his very thoughts. Perhaps it could. The human has emotional attachment to you, Thelian observed, and you to it. To him, Megan corrected gently. And yes, we have formed a bond, that is. significant to us both. Thelian seemed to consider this, its luminous eyes unreadable. Your mission was observation only, emissary. The Council will be concerned by this development. Understand, Megan replied. But circumstances necessitated adaptation. The retrieval vessel is prepared for your return, Thelian said, gesturing toward the hovering craft. Your research data will be valuable, despite the compromised nature of your mission. Keith felt Megan's hand tighten in his. This was the moment they had dreaded, the choice that could not be avoided. Navigator, Megan said, her voice steady despite the emotion Keith could feel trembling through her. I must respectfully request an alternative arrangement. Thelian's posture shifted subtly, the equivalent of raised eyebrows. Explain. I wish to remain on Earth, Megan said. With Keith. A silence fell, heavy with implications. Above them, the jellyfish-like vessel pulsed with light, as if responding to some unseen command. This is unprecedented, Thelian finally said. No emissary has ever requested permanent separation from the collective. I understand the significance of my request, Megan acknowledged. I do not make it lightly. Thelian turned its gaze to Keith again. Human, do you comprehend what she is sacrificing for you? The connection to her kind, the knowledge and experiences of countless generations, the security of her place in our society. Keith met the alien's gaze steadily. I can never fully understand what she's giving up, he admitted. But I do know what she's choosing instead. A life where she can explore emotions and connections in ways her society doesn't allow. A chance to be both herself and something new. And yes, a relationship with me. He squeezed Megan's hand. I promise you, I'll spend every day trying to make that choice worthwhile for her. Thelian was silent for a long moment, its glowing eyes shifting between them. Then it made a gesture with long, slender fingers, a complex movement that seemed to carry deep significance. The Council must be consulted, it said finally. This decision cannot be made by me alone. You will both accompany me to the vessel while communication is established. Keith felt a surge of panic. If we go up there, will you let me come back? That depends on the Council's judgment, Thelian replied with alien frankness. But your cooperative participation may influence their decision favorably. Megan turned to Keith, her luminous eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. We should go, she said softly. This is our best chance. Keith nodded, pushing down his apprehension. Together, he said, and followed Megan into the column of light that had reappeared. The sensation of transport was like nothing Keith had ever experienced. A momentary dissolution of self, followed by reconstitution in a new environment. The interior of the vessel was organic in appearance, with walls that pulsed with the same bioluminescence as its exterior. The floor beneath his feet felt slightly yielding, like walking on firm moss. Thelian led them to what appeared to be a central chamber, where several consoles of unknown design glowed with symbols Keith couldn't begin to decipher. With a series of gestures, the navigator activated a larger display, which shimmered into existence in the center of the room. The Council will convene shortly, Thelian informed them. In the meantime, Emissary Megan, perhaps you should explain to your human companion what this request truly entails. Megan nodded, turning to Keith with an expression of both tenderness and concern. My people maintain a connection to each other that transcends physical proximity, she began. It is not quite telepathy as humans understand it, but a shared consciousness that we can access at will. To be cut off from this connection permanently is considered a kind of death. Keith felt his heart constrict. Megan, I don't want you to die in any way for me. She smiled gently. It is not death as you understand it. More like choosing to exist as a single note rather than as part of a symphony. She took his hands in hers. I have lived with this disconnection since my arrival on Earth. It has been difficult, yes, but I have discovered something I never expected, that a single, profound connection can sometimes be more meaningful than 1,000 lesser ones. Before Keith could respond, the display in the center of the room flared brighter, and several figures appeared, being similar to Megan and Thelian, but with variations in height, coloration, and what appear to be age. "The Council of Elders," Megan whispered to Keith. What followed was a discussion unlike any Keith had ever witnessed. Though conducted in English for his benefit, the concepts and perspectives expressed by the council members were often so alien that he struggled to follow their reasoning. They questioned Megan extensively about her experiences on Earth, her relationship with Keith, and her reasons for making such an unprecedented request. Throughout the interrogation, Megan remained composed, answering with a clarity and eloquence that made Keith's chest swell with pride. She spoke of emotional experiences that had no direct translation in her native language, of the value she had discovered in individual connection, of the personal growth she had undergone since being separated from the collective consciousness. "I do not reject our ways," she assured the council. "I merely seek to explore a different path, one that might eventually enrich our understanding of sentient experience across the galaxy." After what seemed like hours, the council members conferred among themselves in their own language, a complex symphony of harmonics that made Keith think of whale song combined with crystalline chimes. Finally, the eldest appearing member addressed them. "Emissary Megan, your request presents us with a dilemma unprecedented in our historical records. The permanent separation of a consciousness from the collective is not a matter we take lightly." Keith held his breath, feeling Megan tense beside him. "However," the elder continued, "our species has always valued the acquisition of new knowledge and experience. Your time on Earth has clearly provided insights that might not have been gained through conventional observation." The elder's gaze shifted to Keith. "Human Keith, we perceive the genuine nature of your bond with Emissary Megan. Such cross-species emotional attachment is rare and worthy of study in itself." Keith wasn't sure if being considered a subject of study was a good thing, but he nodded respectfully. "Our decision is this," the elder announced. "Emissary Megan may remain on Earth for a period of 1 Earth year. During this time, she will maintain periodic communication with the collective through technology we will provide. At the end of this period, she may choose to return to us or to extend her stay. However, with each extension, the connection to the collective will diminish. After 5 Earth years, the diminishment will be permanent." Keith and Megan exchanged glances, hope dawning between them. This arrangement allows for a gradual transition rather than an abrupt severing, the elder explained. It also provides Emissary Megan with the opportunity to fully comprehend the implications of her choice before it becomes irreversible. "Thank you, honored elders," Megan said, bowing deeply. "Your wisdom and flexibility honor our traditions of exploration and understanding." The council members inclined their heads in acknowledgement, and the display shimmered before disappearing. Thelian turned to them. "The council has been more accommodating than I anticipated," the navigator observed. "You have been granted a rare opportunity, emissary." "I understand," Megan replied, "and I'm grateful." Thelian gestured to a smaller console near the wall. "This communication device will be provided for your use. It will allow periodic contact with the collective as stipulated by the council." The navigator hesitated, then added, "I would advise you to use these 5 years to consider carefully. The loss of connection to the collective is not a small matter." "I will," Megan promised. With another series of gestures, Thelian activated the transport beam. "You may return to Earth now. The communication device will be delivered to your dwelling within 1 rotation of your planet." As they prepared to step into the beam, Keith turned to Thelian. "Thank you," he said simply. The navigator regarded him with those unreadable violet eyes. "Care for her well, human Keith. She sacrifices much for this experiment in emotion." "It's not an experiment for me," Keith replied quietly. "It's love." Thelian's head tilted slightly. "Perhaps that distinction is what we seek to understand." The transport beam enveloped them, and moments later they found themselves back on the rooftop. Above them, the jellyfish-like vessel shimmered and then vanished, leaving only stars in its wake. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the enormity of what had just transpired washing over them. Then Megan turned to Keith, her luminous eyes shining with emotion. 5 years, she said softly. A chance to choose step by step. Keith pulled her into his arms, holding her close under the canopy of stars, some of which she had visited, others which remained mysteries to them both. Or maybe, he suggested gently, we've already chosen, and the 5 years are just time to be certain. Megan smiled, the glow of her skin brightening with emotion. Perhaps that is the wisdom in the council's decision, the recognition that true choice requires both time and experience. As they made their way back to the apartment that had become their shared home, Keith found himself thinking about the journey ahead. There would be challenges, practical matters of helping Megan integrate into human society more fully, decisions about how open they could be about her true nature, considerations of their future together. But underlying all these concerns was a profound sense of gratitude for this chance they had been given. So, he said as they entered the apartment, what shall we do with our first day of official permission to be together? Megan considered the question, then smiled. Perhaps we should begin as we began, with rest and comfort in each other's presence. After all, that was my first request. May I sleep beside you tonight, human? Keith laughed softly, remembering the strange, wondrous night that had started it all. I think that sounds perfect. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Megan's head resting on his chest, Keith reflected on the extraordinary path that had led them here. From a hesitant knock on his door to a council of alien elders deciding their fate, it was beyond anything he could have imagined for his life. What are you thinking? Megan asked softly, sensing his contemplative mood. I'm thinking about improbability, he replied, about all the countless factors that had to align perfectly for us to find each other across the vastness of space. My people have a concept that might translate as cosmic resonance, Megan said. The idea that certain patterns in the universe are drawn to each other across time and distance. Like destiny? More like harmonic inevitability. Like two notes that, when played across the galaxy from each other, still create a perfect chord when they finally meet. Keith smiled in the darkness. I like that idea. So do I, Megan whispered, nestling closer. It suggests that perhaps we were not so improbable after all. As sleep began to claim them, Keith thought about the journey ahead. 5 years of discovery, of building a life together, of navigating two worlds. It would not be easy, but few things of value ever were. What mattered was that they would face each challenge together, finding their way step by step. And it had all begun with a simple, profound question on a quiet night. May I sleep beside you tonight, human? A question that, in its answer, had changed everything.